Has Johnny Guindi's streak at the top truly ended? After 3 difficult races for him, it's time to hit the reset button as we return to Europe. Hello and welcome to the 6th round of the Skip Barber eRace series. The legendary circuit nicknamed the Temple of Speed hosts our races this afternoon. Autodromo Nazionale di Monza in northern Italy, a track locked in the history of motorsport since it opened back in 1922. Potentially one of the hardest races to win this season, courtesy of the slipstream. No one will be able to breathe until the checkered flag is flown at the end of each of our 15-minute races. As always, myself, Lewis McBlade, alongside me, Elliot Bishop. Hello.
Hey, Lewis. I'm really excited about this race here specifically because Monza is the first, actually the first track that I signed up for myself to be able to drive in the Skip Barber series. So I'm actually interested to see what timing we end up having out of these drivers, because their race pace is ultimately going to be a little bit different than their qualifying pace, especially with the slipstream on this track, which is a huge feature. There are a lot of passing opportunities on the track in the infield, but many of the passes that we'll ultimately see, I think, will be similar to the last round, where they will happen on the straightaway and into the braking zones, because slipstream is such a massive benefit here, especially considering these cars all have the exact same setup and they have the exact same motor. All of the features are ultimately the same. The only differentiating factor is the driver inside of the cockpit. So for this race, we will definitely see where, a lot of the drivers are making up their time in the different corners in their braking zones, but I am predicting that many of the passes will definitely happen in slipstream here, Lewis.
Yeah, it's a tricky circuit for sure. I've had my fair share of racing out here. We're having a look at Johnny Guindi there earlier in the session. Of course, noting with him last time out, really struggled. Had 2 races back at Road Atlanta, didn't win. Really struggled with the slipstream at the early point in the race. Whether he's learned very much from that heading into this round at Monza. You can see we've got a bit of a slipstream train here, and the one at the front of that field is Johnny Guindi. Now, the important note from that is how important slipstream will be here in qualifying. You can see there you've got some people picking up the slipstream already. There should be huge gains for it, but you kind of want to give yourself enough room that you don't catch them into one of the braking zones. They run down to the Rettifilio for the first time. Definitely the main overtaking opportunity on the circuit, but in cars with low downforce like this, Elliot, you're going to see moves into here, into Della Roccia chicane. I mean, you're going to see them even into the Lesmos. Someone pulled off. That was Johnny Guindi who pulled off. Wasn't happy with the slipstream that he was dishing out to Ed Kerstetter.
Yeah, and I think, especially considering the fact that we're in qualifying currently, we have I believe this should have been a 10-minute qualifying session, if I remember right. And then we go into 2 15-minute race sessions. But for Johnny Guindi, he doesn't want to hand over the benefit to Ed Kerstetter or to any drivers behind. Because if he's the guy that's leading the train, he will have the slowest speed on the straightaway, because people are going to be benefiting from that tow that is the draft behind him. So Johnny Guindi maybe potentially teasing them quite a little bit by going out in the outlap, and then ultimately just closing the door and returning back to the pits. But yeah, Johnny Guindi maybe just letting them go by, so he's the benefactor of that slipstream. So that is a bit of an interesting strategy, as we are now seeing Johnny kind of by himself. So the cars behind aren't really ultimately going to be able to benefit from that slipstream. I'm a little bit confused. Maybe him stopping out of 1 and 2 was potentially a little bit of a disconnection just on the spectator side, because it definitely seems that we're looking at Johnny Guindi now, and he is ahead of Ed Kerstetter. One thing worth mentioning on the track line that Johnny Guindi runs is that he runs really close to the pit row here, out of the, I believe it's 9 and 10, the parabolical corner, which is a bit interesting with this car. So he does carry and save quite a bit of speed by exiting really tight and not running out to the curb, which is a bit odd, but it could just be a quirk with this track design. Maybe he's finding a bit of grip on that inside line heading in towards the pit straight.
So I think we did actually see Guindi does set the time. The driver that pulled off was actually Nathan Saxon. We did pick him up on the previous lap, so that's where that confusion came. So Johnny Guindi was actually much further down the road and he crosses the line. We'll get a tower up for you in a moment and find out what's going on. I thought very quickly whilst we're here, we'll update you on what's happening in the championship, because of course we've got prizes to play for, and now we're at round 6 of 8. We are really heading into the big numbers in the championship. Still 35 points for a race win, of course, in all of the races this season, but it is important to note the difference in the championship. Johnny Guindi is leading it on 327 points. Sounds great, but not that far behind, and having closing quite a bit after a race victory back in Road Atlanta. Nathan Saxon is now the man that's second in the championship on 291 points, so 36 behind. Still his victory though, clear on points, is Johnny Guindi with 6 races remaining this season. But the fight for second in the championship is very, very tight. Nathan Saxon, Thomas Cadwallader and Sven de Vries all separated by only 6 points. Ed Kerstetter 41 points off the second place, so a decent margin, but if the end of the season goes well for him, you never really know what happens. And of course, what everyone is playing for, the championship prizes, there are some big prizes to play for this season. First place in the championship, the one that is currently held by Johnny Guindi, is a full season in the 2020 Skip Barber Formula Race Series, along with 5-day competition license race school and some Skip Barber coaching as well with it. Then for second place, you get the same 5-day competition license racing school, and then you get the same coaching as well, but you also get the prize of half the season in the 2020 Skip Barber Formula Race Series. And third place, the same top 2 prizes, and then only 1 race in the 2020 Skip Barber Race Series. Now, the important note from that is 6 points separates doing half a season, doing 1 round, and doing none of that. It is pretty tight there for second place.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that points, with the amount of points between first and second place only being, I believe, 3 points based on the finishing order, it will be interesting to see if Johnny Guindi, at any point from now until the end of the season, if he has a DNF in any of these races where, if the car crashes or if he ends up having a massive off where he has to reset to pit, we could see Nathan Saxon actually step up in the points to take the championship lead. This is nowhere near over. And like you said, with real world racing on the line here, these guys are racing in the virtual version of what is on the line for them. If they can win the championship here, they will be in the physical car, in the physical world. What you're seeing on screen, the exact same car, and be instructed by Skip Barber instructors to race in a physical series. So there's a lot on the line here for someone like Sven de Vries or Johnny Guindi or Nathan Saxon, any of these guys in this lineup who maybe, have touched a little bit into the real world of motorsports, into the physical cars, but maybe don't have the financial backing to be able to run an entire season. So this is a huge opportunity for these guys that maybe spend a bit more time in the sim side of things, or might not have had that opportunity in the real world, to cross over much further than something like go-karting. So this is a massive opportunity for these guys. So there is a lot on the line. But as we're sitting here looking at a guy like Sven de Vries, it doesn't prevent them from working with other drivers like Saxon. Sven de Vries has worked with him in the past few races. That actually led to his first race win, just holding Johnny Guindi back. So these guys know what's on the line, but they're still willing to work together to be able to achieve those goals. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not Sven de Vries and Nathan Saxon are willing or able to work together here to be able to keep up with the likes of Johnny Guindi.
Yeah, the tower on the left-hand side of your screen is not fully updated, as I believe we actually do have Johnny Guindi on pole position. I believe he's at a 55.9 earlier in the session. We've got more than 3 drivers who've set time. We've had issues with that tower all season, though, but we'll find out what happens at the end of the session. We're looking at Cadwallader, who finished runner-up 4 times this season, was on the podium twice back in Road Atlanta in the 3rd place. He sat on 286 points coming into the end of the session. You can see there at the bottom of your screen, he's currently sat in 5th place. Don't worry too much about qualifying positions at the moment, though, because slipstream will play such a big factor here. It will be so important that if, say, for example, you do get hit off on the first lap, or you make a mistake on the first lap and you drop out of that slipstream battle, it's going to be very, very hard for you to catch up to that slipstream because you don't have any. You've got a long hill to climb. Just one other driver that we really should throw into the mix, who took a victory last time out, a bit further down the championship, courtesy of only doing 2 rounds thus far this season. Charles Garcia, who was victorious in the last race of the season back at Road Atlanta, was on the podium as well in the race before it. Definitely an impressive driver coming up through the ranks, and definitely one we'll be looking out for here. Could basically play into the top end of the championship by taking points off of the likes of Johnny Guindi, and may even work out in the favour of the likes of Nathon, Saxon, Thomas Cadwallader and Sven de Vries by taking points off of each of those. We've got 15 seconds left in the qualifying session. You can see Johnny Guindi, the one on pole position. You saw how much he took the curb on the exit of Ascari there on the run down towards the Parabolica. I don't think that's particularly the ideal line. We've got someone off at the exit of Ascari. That's not particularly great either. Guindi, though, sat on a 55.912, and that's without slipstream as well. So he's picked his way around this circuit at the moment, Elliot, and well, it seems to be yet another flawless session from Johnny Guindi.
Yeah, and something that I'm noticing, if the tree is correct, is that potentially some of these drivers, as Johnny Guindy's able to put in his final lap time, this track is very, having driven it, this track is very tedious as far as what is allowed within the track limits. So there are times that you end up driving a little bit further off than you did the last lap on the exit of a corner, and then all of a sudden the lap is disallowed. So what's interesting, and something that we should definitely note, is the fact that between the 5 rounds that we've seen, we're on the 6th now. Johnny Guindi typically comes out and sets one single qualifying lap. He drives out after maybe a few minutes into the session, puts a single lap out, and that's it. He's completed, and he's typically sitting on pole position almost 100% of the time. So with Johnny Guindi, we saw him basically driving the entire qualifying session, which is a bit of a first. So maybe a bit of a different strategy being rolled out by him. But as we're going to see, Saxon's going to be coming across the line in 3rd position. That was who I was putting a bit of my bets on, him and Sven de Vries, to be able to bring some pace to Johnny Guindi. But as Kerstetter is going to be finishing his last qualifying lap.
Second is Kerstetter.
Do you see Kerstetter as second?
Yeah, he is second.
Okay, so the tree might not be correct here.
No, the tree is not.
Okay.
So don't panic, everyone.
Yeah, it's just it is still definitely interesting to see Johnny Guindi out for an entire qualifying session. I think you can attribute to the fact that we see Johnny Guindi, he's sitting in the pits, and then all of a sudden he throws in one lap time and he retires the car, and that's kind of how he's dominated this series. But yeah, I think definitely having Sven de Vries, Garcia, and now Saxon all with race wins, we will see as we continue into the sessions how that tends to continue to show vulnerabilities in Johnny Guindy's dominating performance in this series.
You can see there Johnny Guindi then on pole position, so not feeling vulnerable today, ahead of Ed Kerstetter and Thomas Cadwallader, Nathon, Saxon and Sven de Vries behind. Very tight margins between that lot, half a second only separating that lot. Jablonski as well behind, very impressive drive when it comes to the racing this season. We'll see what he can do when it comes to the first race. We'll see you after this. The Temple of Speed awaits a 15-minute race ahead. This is going to be a very, very tight indeed at the top end. Lewis McGlade alongside me, Elliot Bishop, for the first of two races this afternoon. Johnny Guindi on pole position yet again. We'll see if he can translate that into a victory. It's going to be a very hard run down towards the first chicane of the Rettifilio, and then, of course, through Curva Grande into the Della Roggia. Hold your breath, everyone. Everything is going to get very, very tight as the lights will come on. We'll see who can slipstream past who. Ed Kerstetter alongside of him, and everyone behind vying for a victory this season. Guindi hasn't won in 3 races. Away he goes. It's a pretty decent launch from him, but I believe from the second row of the grid, it's a much better launch from the orange-winged car of Cadwalder, who's got up into second position on the run down towards the Rettifilio for the first time. It's a decent launch from Guindi, who's going to lead the way, but everyone slipped through in the background. Cadwalder up to second. Kerstetter leads Saxon, who's got by De Vries. Jablonski not able to make anything up on the race start, and look at the lead that Guindy's already got, trying to break the slipstream. I'm sure Cadwalder and Kerstetter will try and work together here to try and catch Guindi, because he has absolutely bolted and doing everything that he needs to do. Tyres shouldn't be too much of a concern in the early point of this race. Look at that going side by side in the background through Della Roggia. Sven De Vries going into Della Roggia rather. Nathan Saxon as well, and Jablonski. De Vries leads that one into the chicane. Coming out of it, the number 2 car of Ed Kerstetter's got a great launch up towards the Lesmo for the first time. He's going to be on the inside and should be able to take that one. The number 2 car back up into second position. Cadwalder now going to come under intense pressure from the pseudo-Dutchman of Sven De Vries. Oh, a decent launch though from Johnny Guindi. 2 seconds clear. He has gone, Elliot.
Yeah, Guindi, this is exactly what he ultimately wants to achieve at the first lap, is this massive gap, because what we've seen when he has dominated in this series is that within the first few corners, he's able to leave the cars behind, and then he ultimately is at his best. So what I'm looking for right now is whether or not Kerstetter and Cadwalder and potentially Saxon and De Vries are willing to work together, because as you can see on screen, Johnny Guindi is now running away. It looks like there's room for about 5 or 6 cars in between him and Kerstetter with that 2.5 second lead. And because he is the fastest guy on this track between qualifying and the hot lap sessions, Johnny Guindi now, all he has to do is find clean air and just run away with it. But as you've mentioned in the last session, this track is heavily reliant on slipstream. So potentially Kerstetter and Cadwalder, if they are able to work together and able to learn a thing or two from each other, or maybe even look beyond to Johnny Guindi to see what sort of lines he's running, they might ultimately be able to close the gap. And as we're coming into Rettifilio, it looks like Jablonski, I think that's Jablonski was looking to the inside of Sven De Vries, if I
De Vries on the outside. De Vries was on the inside. Jablonski did it on the outside.
Oh, he went around the outside. So this is not necessarily what Jablonski should be or not necessarily Jablonski, but Saxon and De Vries. If they are continuing to battle back here, Johnny Guindi will run away. If Kerstetter and Cadwalder, there's going to be a bit of a gap between the first, second, and third, and then the rest of the field. As things are going to
De Vries just got pinched off there from Jablonski, as there was a bit of side-by-side between Jablonski and Saxon going through Della Roggia. Jablonski has shown a little bit of racecraft here, but Uzbey Abadi has got up into 6th place. Great drive from him, taking advantage of that issue that Sven De Vries has had, being dumped off into the gravel trap on the exit of the Della Roggia. There was a great display between De Vries and Saxon heading through Ascari for the first time. You can see behind this, you've got Scatini and Olsen also going side by side. It's Scatini on the inside as they hit Ascari, and he should be the one on the favoured line, but I think he might have to do a little bit of work to keep that one. That's indeed up to 8th position goes Scatini. Nice work from him. De Vries, though, a lot of work that he has to do. Saxon's dropped off the back of Cadwalder and Kerstetter. Guindy's run away by the tune of 3 seconds at the top of the field. 6/10 between Kerstetter and Cadwalder. So those two sitting pretty at the moment. Saxon, Jablonski, Abadi, who's having a great drive at the moment, and Sven De Vries. You've got some side-by-side there as Garcia gets by Rodriguez Mera, who's really not done particularly well in the races this season. Qualifies, in the pre-qualifiers rather, very, very well. but in the race, not so much. A 56.1 there from Guindi. That is a mightily impressive time. He has absolutely fired off into the distance, as I believe De Vries has got by Abadi again. We look at Garcia trying to get by Rodriguez Mera. They're going to go side by side towards De La Roja, or towards Rettifilio rather. See, I'm getting it messed up as well, Elliot. That's all right, we can all do it. Garcia, though, holds position on Rodriguez Mera and doesn't get by. De Vries, though, up into 6th.
Yeah, and into Rettifilio, it's probably one of the tightest right-hand and left-hand corners on any racetrack. There isn't a lot of space there as you're coming into it as fast as possible, looking for that 100 brake marker, trying to get on the brakes as hard as possible and then turn in. It's interesting to me because these guys are able to run at 158, around a 158, 159 on race pace, which is what I was running in qualifying. So that speaks a little bit ultimately to their talent, but also to the slipstream here, as a lot of these drivers, regardless of being side by side, are able to make up a bit of pace by filing in behind. It looks like Short's going to find a position on Garcia up until 11. One thing I found with these cars specifically on this track was that the brake bias is really important here. I tended to shift it a little bit forward because if you have it a little too far back, you have many of these corners where you want to get hard on the brakes, but have a second bit of braking, just a little bit of a touch, and maybe that's a little bit of an error myself. But if your brake bias is a little bit further ahead, it attributes to some of these chicanes on this track and in maintaining your speed. But it looks like now, as we're getting into the 5 minutes into the race, everyone's going to be filing in, and I think Kerstetter and Cadwalder, they haven't really been battling each other here, as it looks like Short's going to go to the inside here of Rodriguez. He's going to pick up another position, so it looks like he's going to be able to pick up a spot, and then Garcia goes to the inside of Rodriguez as well. So it looks like they're able to make a pass on Parabolica as they're going to be coming in onto the front straightaway here. And I think that Short and Garcia's on the inside here, looking into Rettifilio onto the brakes, and it looks like it's going to go 3 wide here into the first corner. This is going to be a huge race into the braking zone, but this corner is very tight. Short looks like he lost out here as he's going to drop behind both of them, but he could set up for the crossover, and it looks like he's going to be going for it. Is his exit speed going to speak to that, as the 9 car is going to be the slowest here out of the exit? Garcia now going to be dropping down a spot, but Short still on the back wing of him, putting him in pressure as they're going to be coming up to Rogia. I think it's, if I can pronounce that, Rogia. So it looks like Rodriguez and Short are looking to the inside now, as Garcia might be dropping back, but it looks like Garcia is holding a defensive line. That is a very slippery slope to be standing on. And now the 9 car making himself as wide as possible to going into the Lesmo corners. So now Short looking to the inside, lots of space for him. The driver on the outside now setting up for the second right-hander. This is an important corner as you have to carry as much speed as possible, and Short picked up a little too much grass there. Lewis.
Yeah, that's an easy mistake to make. Once you've dipped 2 wheels on the grass ever so slightly, it's very easy to pitch the car, rotate around, and Short has fallen foul of a mistake which has caught many a driver out, be it in smaller Formula and even in Formula 1. Lewis Hamilton. Oh, that was Garcia. Who was that? It was Abadi.
Yep.
Being spun there out of Ascari. I believe that might have been on the front of Sidano Scattini. But either way, after such a good drive in the opening stages, all the way down now in 15th place. Oh, and he spun back across the road. Good job we caught away from that, because that wasn't going to be a very pretty incident. De Vries now straight on the back of Jablonski. He's got 3 seconds clear of Scattini behind. What a display that was between the likes of Garcia and Rodriguez, and then, of course, Short as well. Fantastic racing. That's showing how it really, really can be done around here. And we see the battle rages on between Rodriguez Mera and Garcia. Bear as well also trying to get involved in this. Rodriguez Mera is going to defend down the inside in towards Rettifilio and should be able to make this one stick, but Garcia did it at De La Roja and he's going to try it again, going to give it the inside at Rettifilio. What a move. Nicely stuck around the outside, but now he's going to be all the way through Curva Grande, having to defend on the inside, which is going to be the long run around the outside for Rodriguez Mera. Should be able to get back into the slipstream whilst these two are punching a massive hole in the air for Bear ahead, Bear to rather catch up to the back of this. Sven de Vries, 6th place. Considering his position in the championship, that really isn't good enough. He's battled with Jablonski a few times this season. Remember all the way back to Laguna Seca where they were battling for 2nd place. on the road. A fantastic drive from that lot. It ended up going the way of, or third place rather, it ended up going the way of Sven de Vries, that one. A mistake from Jablonski in the dying moments. But just remember that the numbers they have by their names, that's the position they've qualified into this round. So the number 10 of Jablonski, he always does this, Elliot. He always pre-qualifies really, really low, and then in the race is very, very impressive. I think it's a tactic, as we see Rodriguez Mera trying to get by with Garcia, as Garcia is going to hold the inside into Ascari. You can do side-by-side through Ascari. It's just really, really not ideal. And Bear is very much a part of this battle now.
Yeah, and like you said, Ascari, the right and left-hander, which is going to be 7 and 8. What we're seeing now is what I would consider to be the part of the back straightaway. But if you go side by side, you're going to set yourself up with a reduced exit speed. So onto that straightaway, if a car gets into the slipstream, you're putting yourself at risk of getting passed, as we've seen many times in this race where 3 cars are battling, and then one of the cars in the back are able to just grab the draft and drive a line that's a little bit cleaner and without battling. So, yeah, it's definitely going to be a bit of a challenge here, as I believe this is going to be Garcia going to the inside into Rettifilio. He's going to be racing down the front straightaway, battling for braking zone. And if Garcia is smart here, he's just going to look for the crossover, as it looks like, Rodriguez, it looks like Garcia cooked his wheel just a little bit, getting on the brakes a little too hard. Rodriguez is going to file in behind, now in 10th position, as they're going to be going through Curva Grande. But it looks like Rodriguez has the slipstream here, and this is another braking zone coming up into Rogia. So we're going to hop back up into the perspective of Cadwalder, who's going to be with the likes of Saxon on his back bumper. He was able to win in the race, I believe 2 races ago in round 5. So Saxon's now on the back wheel of Cadwalder, with Kurstetter just ahead. So the battle for second and third position is on here. Johnny Guindi with a dominating 5-second lead. You just see him go across the screen there as he's going to be filing his way into Ascari. He is completely gone here. And I think one thing that you were mentioning here, Lewis, was that with I believe it was the 10 car of Jablonski, he tends to, that was getting very close there. I think he actually had to touch the brakes just a little bit as he was catching way too quickly into on that draft. It looks like he dove back behind, but he might have it.
I think Cadwalder was slowing down intentionally. That's why he caught so quickly off the exit of the Ascari, because I think Cadwalder doesn't want to be leading this. Nathan Saxon's pace at the moment, he caught a 1.5 second gap up to the back of the podium. Of course, just to remind you at home, this battle between Saxon and Cadwalder is for their position in the championship. This will be a couple of points swing either way, depending on the result of it. They're going to go side by side into Rettifilio. It's Saxon on the inside, Cadwalder on the outside. It's going to go the way of Saxon at the moment, but I don't think Cadwalder is going to be panicking too much. 2 laps to go in the race. And I don't know about you, but that lifting out from Cadwalder, trying to allow Saxon through, and then those two going side by side, it's allowed Kurstetter to run away for second place. So maybe a short-sighted move, as De Vries is going to pick the outside through Curva Grande. It's going to give him the inside into De La Rogier, and it should be a fairly simple move. We have seen the likes of Garcia throw it around the outside. Jablonski doesn't really fight that one very hard, and the top 5 goes the way of Sven de Vries.
Yeah, and I think that there's a few critical right-hand corners, from 3, 4, and 5, which we're seeing now. This is 4, and then coming into 5, where for Jablonski, it's almost better for him just to wait till he gets the slipstream, because if you drop wheels off right there where you just saw, if you drop your wheels off, you're going to end up spinning out, which we saw a bit earlier. If I remember, it was Garcia, if I remember correctly, that just caught a little bit too much of the grass. And for him, it might just be better to wait for one of these straight bits and look to the inside and just battle for the braking zone. It looks like the door is going to be slammed there. Or actually, Cadwalder did go through. Oh, and it looks like...
Who's that? That's Saxon, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Saxon. Saxon's going to drop down from, I believe he was in third position. So, yeah, Cadwalder's able to find a position there and hop up. But going back to your point about Jablonski qualifying in 10th position, the one thing that we have to remember with these tracks is that they're built specifically for this series, and the track limits are dependent on just the design. So for a guy like Johnny Guindi, not only is he fast, but he's finding the exact limits of what's possible and what's fast on these tracks. we try to get it as close as possible. So the real world is Sven de Vries is going to be filing just in behind Jablonski, but he's going to go to the outside here. So if Jablonski can hold his speed, he's going to have the position to be able to get late in braking. But as you see, Sven de Vries is going to be stepping inside just to create a bit of an issue for Jablonski, where he basically doesn't have the late braking opportunity. Otherwise, he's going to crash into the back of Sven de Vries. But when we get into the qualifying and the hot lap sessions, all of these drivers are completely blind to the speed and the pace and the line the other drivers are taking. And that's something that I was able to find out myself as I was driving, as it looks like we're going to be going into either the last lap or the second to last lap here. I'll make this quick, but you're completely blind. So for Jablonski, maybe, you know, he's able to just qualify in the top 20, and then he's learning a lot in the qualifying in the first race here regarding the line and the pace that other drivers are taking. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that we also release the fastest lap as a video. So those guys are going to be able to study the racing line and potentially take that to alter their own pace. So maybe that's a strategy that Jablonski's deploying. He's qualifying in the top 20, and then he's looking at how Johnny Guindi is able to cut off a few seconds off of his time.
Indeed. Well, this is the final lap of the race, and I will say that move from Saxon is massive for the championship. That is absolutely huge, because he is currently second in the championship. De Vries has got by Jablonski and has gained that position now, 1.2 seconds clear of Jablonski, so he's going to gain points. Cadwalder, who went into this third in the championship, goes into this race third in the race, has now gained massively for that second place of the championship. This could be a big turning point for that battle for second place. At the top, though, it is restored. Johnny Guindi leaves the final corner and takes victory again in the Skip Barber eRace series. His 3-race streak of being beaten has come to an end as Guindi climbs to the top again. Kerstetter, the number 2 car, goes to second as he's trying to latch onto the back of the battle for second place. Cadwalder, De Vries, Jablonski behind, Schettini, and then what happened to Nathon Saxon? The number 3 car dropped to 7th. I'm assuming there was an incident of some description between the likes of Kerstetter and Cadwalder. Guindi happy to be victorious again. Not really sure what happened, like I said, with Saxon. That could be massive, though, because there is a huge swing in points. Points go all the way down to the bottom end of the field. The likes of 35 points go to the way of this man. He's very, very strong in this championship. Started out the season by taking 7 consecutive victories. Took him a little bit longer to get the 8th one than expected, but from the start of the race, just absolutely ran away with things. Kawashima just behind Bowers at the final position on the road, I believe. Or Gomez Jr. is going to be the last one as he's going towards the Parabolica. The number 7 car obviously had a lot of issues for him, all the way down in 16th place. And unfortunately for him, I feel the race has been a bit of a struggle. This race is fine when you're battling for position and when you're running up towards the top lot, but when you're dropped down driving by yourself, it can be a bit of a boring circuit. And you can see he's pulling off straight away to escape. That there wraps up the first race. Of course, we've got a second one to follow and a second race that will be very, very interesting. It follows the grid order that we've got from the first one, which of course Johnny Guindi will start once again from the front row, being pole position. A lot to decide, though, Elliot, for that race. Decent drive from Guindi.
Yeah, there's a lot to take in it, but I think you nailed it on the head. With Saxon and Garcia being nowhere near the starting row to be able to challenge Guindi going into corner number 1, because what we've seen with Johnny Guindi, whether or not it was a technical issue at Road Atlanta, is that as soon as he is pulled back into what I keep calling the crab pot, which is the majority of the drivers fighting for position, you know, from anywhere between 2 and 10 in the standings. As soon as Guindi gets pulled back into that in the first few corners of these races, it's very challenging because people want to bring it to Guindi. So they're throwing it inside on every single corner, every opportunity. And as I've mentioned before, they're battling for every single inch of this track and every single inch of every track in this series. These drivers are battling for position. We've seen it, you know, the likes of Sven de Vries and Saxon working together, but this is very important because the race number 2 is for points, what we're about to go into right after the quick break. But what's important is that the likes of Gomez Jr. And Sven de Vries and Saxon, they're not there to make that pass on the first corner into trap Guindi. So Kerstetter and Cadwalder have to do that if they want to be able to win their first race here. So we will definitely see that coming into the next race, race number 2 here at Monza after this quick break. Johnny Guindi in a world of his own, 5 seconds of lead in the last race. Is this going to be the moment for Cadwalder or Kerstetter to throw it to the inside of the first corner here? It is the only chance and the only opportunity that they're going to be able to see Guindi. The closest that they're ever going to be to him is right now. Johnny Guindi starting on the first line, the first row. Can he hold them off going into Rettifilio here as the lights are going to be coming on? Johnny Guindi with a huge start the last race. Can he do it again? It looks like he's going to get a little bit of a late start, but he's going to drive to the inside defensive line here. What's very important here is that he has the inside for the first corner. He was a bit further away from them last time, but are these guys going to try to late break the best in the game, which is Johnny Guindi? Looking to the outside, the car with the blue wing, I believe it was the 15 car, the 10 car potentially of Jablonski picking up a few positions there. He's going to be up into 4th position, but Johnny Guindi with Cadwalder off of his back bumper. All Cadwalder is looking to do here is learn a thing or two from Johnny Guindi and hold the draft. As we've mentioned many times in this series and at this track, the draft is the most important thing and the biggest differentiator if you want to be anywhere near the car ahead. So now Cadwalder looking for a tow from Johnny Guindi, but as we're going to be coming into the 2 Lesmo right-hand corners, it is very complicated to stay in behind a car ahead, especially as you're going to catch that draft and drive yourself out to that outside corner, not having as much downforce. So maybe if Johnny Guindi, he's in a great position here to run away from Cadwalder, as it looks like I believe Jablonski's going to pick up a little bit of grass and maybe DeFries is going to have a bit more pace. He might find himself a position here, but Garcia also finding a position, as it looks like I believe Olsen is going to drop back quite a bit. Is this the runaway that Johnny Guindi needs here, Lewis?
Well, he's only half a second clear of Cadwalder. They got back into single file much better this race, as you saw the number 2 car of Kerstetter really throw it over the final part of the Ascari chicane. Cadwalder the closest to challenge, but you can see through Ascari, Guindi has pulled away. It's 6/10, but now we're in slipstream territory as they run towards Parabolica. The top 6 clearing away from the top, but there's definitely been an incident further back in the pack. Guindi, Cadwalder, Kerstetter, De Vries, Jablonski and Rodriguez all part of this battle. Then we've got the likes of Garcia getting by Saxon. You've got Short ahead of this and Uzbek Badi also in 10th place in a little quartet of themselves. Saxon sneaks back through on the inside of Garcia. For Saxon, again, not a good start to his race. He dropped back at the end of the first one, courtesy of that incident at Ascari, and is now all the way down in 8th place and battling with Garcia, the driver that he was battling with for the victory last time out. So, how do things change when we come back to Europe? And things really not working out for Nathan Saxon or Charles Garcia, to be honest. Half a second between Cadwalder, Kerstetter, De Vries apiece, but with Guindi ahead, it's pretty tight, and I kind of feel that he's really got to pull out the big guns here as they head up. They'll be heading up towards De La Roger again, and then that's where Guindi really pulls out the advantage. Kawashima up to 14th position. You see Sidona Scatini getting by Olsen as well. Shepherd as well, another retirement, 2 back-to-back ones. It was retirement from the first race, retirement from this one as well. So things going not very well for him here in Italy.
Yeah, and I think what I'm predicting here is that Sven de Vries is sitting in a great position here. Not a second between any of the drivers between the top 4 currently. So for Sven de Vries, all he needs to do is radio Cadwalder and say, put as much pressure as possible on Johnny Guindi. Put as much pressure as you possibly can. Look to the inside, even if you don't get the position. even if you just go side by side with a single wheel, just to put Johnny Guindi off of any opportunity for him to create pace is going to be a massive, massive opportunity for Sven de Vries and Kerstetter and potentially even Jablonski to close some gap. But Johnny Guindi hasn't run away as fast as we've seen him in the past. So maybe a bit of that draft is creating a bit of an opportunity, as I believe if Kerstetter and Cadwalder here on the front straightaway, as they're going to be coming out of Parabolica, if they can just work together, create a bit of speed, Kerstetter get in behind Cadwalder, get to the outside, pass by, and then Kerstetter or Cadwalder file in behind and just work off of each other's draft to ultimately create a bit of an advantage to the driver ahead. If they can do that, they will find themselves finding Johnny Guindi, but they're not going to find any pace, as it looks like they're going to be battling each other coming into, I think that's Retafilio. So now Johnny Guindi, as you see, a little bit of a battle there, and now Johnny Guindy's picked up 4/10 immediately. So go ahead.
I was going to say, the thing is that Guindi pulled out 2.5 seconds to 3 seconds on the first lap last time. He's just going to pull it out bit by bit here. He was 6/10 quicker than Cadwalder on the previous lap, as they're going to now start battling, as Kerstetter feels his chances of catching Johnny Guindi slightly better, and he goes through. Or rather, so Ed Kerstetter stays in second position. Now going to get passed, by Sven de Vries on the run towards the first Lesmo.
Yeah, and I think this is exactly what Johnny's looking for. This is the best opportunity, and now another 5/10 between the point that you picked up for me, Lewis. That's how much pace that Johnny Guindy's been able to find. So Johnny, looking back, if he's using his review mirror, seeing Cadwalder and Kerstetter battling into the tightest corner on the track, which was Retafilio, and then into Rogia, he's ultimately just creating a bunch of distance, and Cadwalder and Kerstetter basically hurting each other a little bit there. So I think, we've seen the likes of Sven de Vries and Saxon work together to be able to catch up to Johnny Guindi. And I think, now we're seeing Johnny Guindi run away again. So many of these drivers filing in behind. The thing, when you're in draft and when you're behind another driver, maybe they have a bit of a different line. Maybe they break a little bit earlier than you. And it gets a little bit frustrating when you have a car ahead, when you know that your ultimate objective is to get ahead to the first position and catch him. And it gets a little bit frustrating because you know that maybe your pace is a little bit faster. Maybe you feel that you have a better opportunity to catch up to Johnny Guindi. And you try to look to the inside, but then instead you just create a bunch of more of a gap between yourself and the driver you're battling. And not only that, but between the driver that's in the lead. So Johnny Guindi is going to be running away currently, but it looks like Cadwalder's not completely out of this, as it looks like Garcia is just going to get a little bit sideways. And this is something that we haven't seen yet, which is Saxon and Garcia fighting mid-pack. You did mention, Lewis, that Garcia came into the series, his first race, he was he hid under the covers a little bit, and then he came out and he found himself a race win in the second round that he was a part of. So keeping our eyes on Garcia, this is a guy that has a lot of talent. He's been able to be one of the I think we've only had 4 race winners now, and he was one of them. So putting himself on a podium with those guys is very important. Obviously, Johnny Guindi has plenty of races. He had 8 race wins in a row, but he also lost 3 in a row. So it seems that he's the guy of records and back-to-backs, whether or not it be winning or losing. So Cadwalder, Kerstetter, de Vries, not sure if they have an opportunity here to catch Guindi, but lots of points on the line here, Lewis.
Yeah, I think that's been a decent launch from Cadwalder as he got by Kerstetter, but now coming under pressure. I will say one driver we need to keep focused on was the driver setting some pretty electric pace back in the pack, and very importantly so was Nathan Saxon, who's in 7th place at the moment. Set some decent times over the previous ones. We see the top 2 going side by side with Kerstetter and Cadwalder once again. Johnny Guindi clear down the road. Kerstetter now up into 2nd position again. But Cadwalder's going to go for the cutback whilst this is happening. De Vries behind is eyeing them up, slipstreaming and trying to pull himself closer. The number 6 car of Cadwalder is going to pick the outside as they run through the start-finish towards Retafilio once again. It should be an 8-lap race as they switch positions coming across the line. Cadwalder now going to have to go the long way round. I think he's got the car ahead at the moment. 3 seconds clear is Johnny Guindi. Kerstetter's going to leave it down the inside, cost him both time. There is Sven de Vries with the pink-winged car, very much a part of this. I know Sven de Vries, I like a pink-winged car. He maybe changed one of the liveries on my cars back in the day to having a pink stripe rather than a red stripe on it, so I'm sure he's loving that. Maybe that's why he qualified in 8th place. Rodriguez Mera not too far behind this as well, a second behind. Jablonski going to be coming under pressure from Nathan Saxon, pretty sharpish. Short and Garcia separated by only a tenth. That's the battle that we head to, as Short is ahead of Garcia. Garcia is going to go down the inside through the exit of Curva Grande up towards De La Roger and is already through. These two, that is how you work together in slipstream, because Short basically saw that Garcia was already basically there and just went, no, do you know what? I'm not going to try and stay side by side through De La Roger because we're just going to lose tenths and tenths and tenths. It's not worth it. I'm going to drop back. I'm going to get back in line, as I think it was Nathan Saxon picking up a bit of dust on the exit of the first Lesmo. Battle for third place as De Vries closing up to the back of Kerstetter. Cadwalder still holding second at the moment and Rodriguez behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing to keep in mind here is that Cadwalder and Kerstetter, maybe they're at the point now where they're like, okay, Johnny, we're probably not going to catch him. Let's battle for second place and make this interesting. Maybe that's how they feel now that they've, kind of anchored themselves and each other back and created a bit of a gap between themselves and Johnny Guindi. But as we're on board here with Sven de Vries, something that I really want to bring up, because I think that this is what has really created a lot of the gap for Johnny Guindi, is this corner that these guys are driving into right now is called Parabolica. It is a sweeping hard right corner, and as you see Short, I'm going to make a good point about this. So Short was able to go to the inside, I believe, on Garcia, but now look at how much pace Garcia is going to have coming down the front straightaway. You're basically, that corner right now, Parabolica, is creating as much pace and speed as possible coming onto the front straightaway. So if you look to the inside for a pass on Parabolica, you're setting yourself up actually for a loss of that position, because the driver behind is going to have the draft the entire way onto the front straightaway, which is exactly what we just saw. Short went to the inside on Parabolica, drove down the front straightaway, and then he found himself behind the driver that he tried to pass. So I think with Cadwalder and Kerstetter, they were looking to pass on Parabolica quite a few times, whether or not it was because they found themselves at the same pace side by side. But I think if they were able to allow each other to go through and then hold a good line coming out of Parabolica and potentially battle in the front straightaway instead, they would have been able to keep a bit of a closer distance between themselves and Johnny Guindi. But instead, they ruined their pace onto the front straightaway and then found themselves, I believe it's about a 5 or 6 mile an hour difference if you have a bad entry into Parabolica, just from my own experience. So maybe that is what has caused this gap to be able to be created by Johnny Guindi, is the fact that these guys are battling at a bad part of the track. What do you think about that, Lewis? Yeah, absolutely. And I think one person I really want to highlight, I know that we've seen him going back and forth. We've seen him in a few incidents in the series, and just having a bit of an issue, finding a bit of pace himself, is a body, as it looks like Johnny Guindi cut pretty much that entire track, or that entire corner. I'm not sure if that was just a glitch in the spectator. Sometimes that happens where it doesn't know exactly where the driver is, so it shows him kind of off into a different position. As it seems like he was nowhere near the inside curb, but maybe that was a bit of an issue on his side. But a body, we've seen him pretty much battling every single time in any race that he's been a part of. He's been able to qualify for, I believe, the past 3 rounds, at least as far as my memory is recalling. But a body's in the top 10, which is a huge position for him. As he, as I mentioned, he's found himself in a few issues. He's found himself in a few collisions. I think at the beginning of this race, he found himself off in the dirt, and then I think that was the last race. He found himself spinning out, and then he rejoined the track, and I think he collected voucher, if I remember correctly. But to be back in the top 10 is huge for him. So maybe he's just been able to follow in behind the likes of Short and Garcia, because those guys, some of the fastest drivers on this track, dropped back quite a bit. And now Body's able to follow them and ultimately learn a thing or two. So good for him finding himself in the top 10. I'm excited to see how he develops going forward. But we're in the last, as we're filing down to it, the last 30 seconds of this race, everything matters at this point. Ooh. Saxon on the outside, he's going to get pinched off and potentially into the dirt. Saxon losing a bit of pace as Jablonski's going to pinch him out. Not a lot of pace or a lot of space there, is maybe a bit of an error on Saxon's part, and not a lot of pace.
Who's that? Is that Rodriguez? Is that Rodriguez Mara?
I believe that's Boucher.
Or is that going a lap down? Yeah,
I believe that's a lap down driver. So good getting out of the way there. A bit of a spin out. But I think he was slowing down and maybe just wanted to get off the racing line, so he did that as fast as possible there.
I will say Jablonski did the very similar thing on Sven de Vries. Apologies for earlier in the race when I didn't unmute my microphone. Apologies everyone listening if the coverage went silent. That was my mistake. Johnny Guindi though, 3.6 seconds clear. The final slipstream on the run down towards the Parabolica. That instant from Jablonski and Saxon. I'm sure Saxon might be a little bit miffed by all of that. Guindi leading the way at the front as he's done for most of this season. Going to go back-to-back here at Monza. It's been a great drive from the number 1 of Guindi, who is definitely reasserting himself at the top of the championship as he's going to come across the line. What a drive from Johnny Guindi again. Lights to flag, almost no pressure outside of the first lap. Cadwalder going to come across 3.6 seconds back, so a less dominant display from Johnny Guindi. Kerstetter leads De Vries. Still no podium from De Vries for a little while, so he really needs to get back on top of things since that victory back in Silverstone. Rodriguez, Jablonski, Saxon behind, Garcia, Short and Abadi across the line. Things pretty tight there between that battle for second place, but unfortunately nothing really working out for Sven de Vries. Decent gain though for Cadwalder in the championship as we head into the penultimate round of the season. Elliot, what a display from Johnny Guindi again.
Yeah, Johnny Guindy's back on his paces here. He had 8 race wins in a row, and now he's back on the podium with 2 in a row here at this round. So Road Atlanta maybe just not being his track. We saw him losing a bit of pace at Road Atlanta, and I wonder if it was a technical issue. We never got word of that, so maybe I'll check in with him to see. Yeah, Johnny Guindy's back here, and he's controlling this series yet again. What's interesting is Cadwalder and Kerstetter have always been people that we've mentioned, and they are back on the podium themselves there, with Sven de Vries just outside of the podium, unfortunately for him. But this shakes up the championship quite a bit, as Saxon's going to be finishing 7th and Garcia is going to be finishing 8th. But I believe Kerstetter and Sven de Vries still in the points, so maybe they're feeling a bit better that Saxon finished 7th. That's pretty much where Johnny Guindi finished the last time that he was having some issues at Road Atlanta. Johnny Guindi is as happy as can be, as he's basically put himself back in the dominating position that he has been in this championship. So Kawashima as well, a great performance, able to find his pace as well. And I think one thing with these cars is that the first race, in the first time that you get into them, it's a little bit weird and it's a little bit strange just feeling out the car. Anytime that you get into anything new, it's a matter of figuring it out. And I think that it really speaks to Skip Barber's instruction for a lot of these drivers, just ultimately being able to have a bit of time, learn a thing or two about the tracks and about the car itself and how the car behaves on the track. And we've seen a lot of drivers be able to develop over time. So what's interesting is that Cadwalder, Kerstetter, De Vries, Rodriguez, Jablonski, and Saxon, all the drivers ahead of Garcia, they've all had pretty much every single round. So 6 rounds, 6 weeks of time to work with the Skip Barber team. and he's only had 3. So the fact that he was able to find his own race win is massive. So we'll be able to see, that was in the last round, obviously, at Road Atlanta, as Guindi was able to dominate here. But Garcia, the more time he's able to get with the Skip Barber team, we might see him be able to pick up some of these positions on Jablonski, on Rodriguez, on Sven de Vries. And, depending on where we go next, he could also be able to find himself in the points once again.
Yeah, Garcia's done a great job, of course, with that victory last round out. But this round definitely goes the way of Guindi. 2 race wins from him. That makes it 9 race wins across the Skip Barber eRace Series 2020. Of course, if you want to come and take part, you can do so. The qualifying opens tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Pacific. We open the qualifiers, is open for basically most of the day. Come and take part. $20 entry fee, Bridgehampton race circuit, the penultimate round of the Skip Barber eRace Series in only a week's time. Lewis McGlade, Elliot Bishop will see you in a week's time. Until then, goodbye.